Any update?
We're reconvening at 3. I'll just reconvene and I'll hand it over to you, Teresa.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Did you have lunch?
I had 2. Hey, Barrett, Regional Chief, has she joined us? Is she back?
I sent her a text. She's in that room alone still. She was messaging me saying that she was just grabbing some notes, I understand, from the chat still. I think some of the chiefs did remain behind and she didn't get a chance to do that earlier, but I did just send her a message and let her know we're all in here waiting to start.
Okay.
So
let her know where it'll start up, and I'll ask. Before I hand it over to you, Teresa, I'll get a sense of the room if they're willing to go a little longer and get to a specific agenda item, and then I'll hand it over to you and Goonies to wrap it up. And I think all I have after that is just a wrap.
Okay.
So Matthew, we just so you know, we did shut the live stream off, and we are now back live streaming now that the break's over.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everyone had a chance to have lunch. Well, leadership did have lunch. I realize you're all coming back from your in-camera session. I'm just going to wait for the regional chief to join us back, and then I'll reconvene the meeting. Just so everybody knows, we're back on live stream, 3 p.m. We are back from our in-camera session. We're a little behind on our agenda, so I do want to have a little conversation on how we want to proceed for the remainder of the day and also plan for tomorrow. And then I'll hand over the chair to Teresa and my Goonies to take over for the rest of the day. I just want to make sure we have the regional chief is back before I start up. So a couple of minutes and then we'll jump right into the agenda.
Matthew, it's Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Did you get the note that Line Goonies is Line Goonies has no power. He's trying to connect again. So
okay, well, maybe hopefully he gets power back, and by the time we come around to his items. Teresa takes over now, and if we need to go, I can always cover it. No problem.
There was no notice about them temporarily shutting off the power, were there?
Mm-mm.
Hey, Languni, you're back. Power came back.
No, I am currently on a mobile hotspot on my phone.
Oh,
I'm dedicated to staying on the line, so we'll see how long that lasts. I can't charge the phone, so it's almost like a little tiny generator giving me some internet right now.
okay, geez. Hopefully power comes back on and then it'll be okay.
All right.
Don't want to start up until the regional chief has joined us, so give her a few more minutes.
Yeah, I'll be turning off the camera to conserve the connection.
Perfect. Okay, well, as we wait for real chief, we might as well just start our conversation. So welcome back, everyone. I would like to reconvene our meeting here. Hopefully everyone had time to have some lunch. I realize your camera session went quite long. I do want to get a sense from the room if everyone's okay to get to a certain spot in the agenda today. I know we're behind a couple or maybe 2 or 3 hours, so I want to get a sense from the room if it's okay if we go through the agenda right up to the point where we start the sector updates. So my idea is that we plug through today as far as we can. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 agenda items to get through, and then we can adjourn for the day, start the day tomorrow with the sector updates. And I'm thinking with the delay a little bit, we might go to 2 or 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in terms of getting through the resolutions. So as I said, our job here as the co-chairs is to try to get us everyone through the agenda and through all the resolutions that are pressing for the Chiefs of Ontario. So I'm looking for guidance. I guess my question is there any objection to going to 4:30 today? I'm guessing 4:30, or at least get us to finish the 4 agenda items we have before us. So what I want to do is get the Secretariat update. I would like to get the Youth Council update. I would like to have a conversation on the restructuring update, and I would also like to complete the resolutions report. So I would like to finish those agenda items today and then start tomorrow afresh with starting with our sector update. So we'll start with the justice, health, education, and then we'll follow as the agenda has set out. So I put it to the chiefs. We do have, everyone did come back. I see everyone on the list. So we do have, we have retained quorum. So everyone's back. So I'm getting a sense. Is everyone okay to go to 4:30 today? So what I'll ask is any comments, and if you can raise your hand if you object to that plan, as opposed to
Matthew?
yes, Tracy.
Matthew, it's Tracy. I believe Nathan Wright had his hand up prior to you asking the question.
Okay, sorry, Chief Wright.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for the promotion, but I'm Councillor Wright.
Sorry about that. Next term. Sorry.
I'll be holding proxy just for the next little while. I know Chief Mark Hill will be joining, but a few councillors had asked me just to make a quick statement here, just about the process that happened this morning. A number of them felt disrespected in terms of how long the in-camera, the fact that the in-camera wasn't scheduled. That they had intended to come on to hear their portfolios and had allotted that certain time in terms of that to occur. So they wanted me to note that just in a constructive way. And the suggestion from our council was that, you know, to hold these and to give a heads up when political discussions need to occur, because we certainly appreciate that the regional chief needed to talk with the chiefs directly. But also, you know, just to have that communication back to, because they are councillors and they do hold elected positions within our community as well. So I've been asked to raise that and to bring that forward in a good constructive way with a suggestion of how we can move forward better in future assemblies. So I'll leave my comments there. Like to also acknowledge all of the chiefs as well as the prayers that happened this morning. And wish everybody the best for the rest of the day. Go.
Congratulations, noted for sure. I understand that the importance of these sector councils and how sometimes these things go off the rails. While I had you, I was going to ask you, are you okay to go to 4:30? So what I'll ask everyone in terms of, is there any objections to going to around 4:30, or at least trying to finish by 4:30, but getting through the agenda items we have before us, right before the sector councils, sector updates, and then starting our day with sector updates. At least that's our plan, hopefully to get to that point today, and then start our sector updates tomorrow. Also noting for sure what Nathan has shared with us in terms of moving forward. If there are those kinds of issues that need to be, that they be also set out in the agenda ahead of time so people have the opportunity to join in those conversations. So I'm looking for hands up in terms of any objections to finishing those agenda items up to the sector updates. I see none. I'll open the floor if there's any thoughts or conversation around that change to the agenda. So the plan is to finish our 4 agenda items up to the sector updates, starting our agenda tomorrow with sector updates, and probably going into the afternoon to make sure that we complete all of the resolutions. Thoughts, comments, issues, concerns?
Almost 4:30.
Okay, let's jump right into the agenda. I hand over the chair to Teresa. Everybody.
Thank you, Matthew. Good afternoon, Regional Chief and Chiefs. And as Matthew have said, we will proceed with the updates, Secretariat updates. And at this time, the next person who will be up to speak is the Chief Operating Officer for Chiefs of Ontario. But before I do that, there's a slight change in the agenda this afternoon. Before we go on to the change, it's being proposed that we move the First Nation Management Board Association to tomorrow, to postpone it till tomorrow, and the rest should remain as it is for this afternoon. Continuation, completing the morning agenda. And now I will introduce Tracy Anton, Chief Operating Officer. You're on, Tracy.
Go. So everyone. I just wanted to make a brief acknowledgement of Grand Chief Hare and thank him for all of his prayers that he's been giving us, and acknowledging that he did have good thoughts for our meeting in his morning Thanksgiving. And also for the elders and the drum song. All of these ceremonies are really important in this stressful time, as it gives us an opportunity to reflect and look inside of who we are and what we can do. On behalf of the Chiefs of Ontario Secretariat, again, welcome to the Special Chiefs Assembly 2021. As you all know, we are meeting virtually again, and we hope that we will have a good session. I definitely want to acknowledge the staff behind the scenes who are registering the chiefs and guests, who are troubleshooting and also preparing the resolutions for tomorrow. As well, a special thank you to Barrett, who's been our primary lead for the organization of this meeting. So a job well done, folks. For those of you who may not know me, I am Tracy Antone. I'm from Onondaga. And as of December 2020, I have been officially accepted the role of Chief Operating Officer by appointment by the Board of Directors. Previously, I was the Chiefs of Ontario Health Director for 20 years. Now this position will officially be posted. As you know, in the past year, we've experienced many changes, challenges, and great successes at the Secretariat. We transitioned everyone to work from home during the pandemic. We continue to do our work virtually and through the Zoom platform. Since the pandemic started, we have hosted 1,945 meetings, which equates to 860,000 meeting minutes. Education has hosted 18 webinars. And of course, the 5 top users of the Zoom are the political office, policy, education, health, and social. One of the opportunities that resulted from working remotely was the upgrade and the overhaul of the website. We continue to make the website more efficient and a place where leadership can find the information and briefings that staff have completed. I want to acknowledge the policy and communication sector for taking this on a little earlier than expected. Great job, Jenna, Barrett, and Andrew. We've also had the challenge to build our capacity, and we were able to leverage other opportunities as others were transitioned out of jobs. We were able to expand our staffing by securing 10 new employees in the Secretariat and 5 in the Regional Chief's Office. The Secretariat positions are in social, health, education, and the environment. All new employees have been through the HR process. All have specific cost centers, and the RSC's office has contracted, and they have employee positions for policy analyst, communications, and the director of policy specific to COVID, which was Colleen, who you heard from this morning. Of course, orientation is key, and this was done by briefing the new staff through the directors and our admin staff. We also implemented orientation packages for leadership that have been newly elected. And once we get notice that the chief has been elected, we will send out this orientation package so the chiefs get familiar with the secretary and the staff who assist them in different sectors. Undoubtedly, the separation between administration and the political arm of the Chiefs of Ontario has enabled us to work on our mandates given to the Secretariat and to continue the collaborative and support needed for the Regional Chief's Office and the work of the Leadership Council. The directors continue to engage with the leadership in various committees and with the Leadership Council. And at this time, I want to officially welcome Sarah Grace Ross, who has taken on the position of Justice Director. And you'll be hearing from her when we do the sector updates. The board continues to provide the corporate leadership to move the Secretariat into a sound financial management process and providing tools of a good corporate governance. At this time, I want to thank the board for their support and wisdom to moving forward. From Anishinaabeg, Gary Dokis, from Grand Council Treaty 3, Gary Allen, Jeff Stonefish from AIAI, and Travis Busno from Anishinaabe. The board has approved policies that reflect the strengthening of a harassment policy and provisions for emergency situations such as this pandemic, and specific recommendations to improve the function of our finance department. The organization has maintained a strong work ethic to assist the leadership in this unexpected environment. Directors, analysts, finance, and coordinators rose to the challenge that was put before them and made a high quality of work and accountability to the leadership and technicians of the First Nations communities. As a Secretariat, we continue to monitor our mandates as directed by the leadership and provide recommendations to the Leadership Council and to you, the Chiefs and Assembly. Despite COVID-19, I'm so proud of the COO staff and want to acknowledge their resilience and dedication to the work that we have tasked them with. I want to ensure you that during COVID, all operations have been fulfilled and our work for leadership continues. For myself, I feel the organization is operating professionally despite all of the staff not being together. I've continued to monitor the restructuring process and feel that we're making progress, as you will see in the updates that will be given. Our financial status remains stable, and working with the finance director to ensure that all sectors are communicating with the funders and making adjustments to their work plans accordingly. I continue to support the directors as they work through the challenges of staffing, budgeting, and continue to foster the thinking out of the box to keep communications to the leadership and communities advanced. Going forward, we will continue to advocate and work on the mandates the leadership have set before us. We continue to forge new ways of working and communicating and have launched 2 newsletters, one from the health sector and one from the environment sector. You will also see in the meeting site a progress document on resolutions that have provided the Secretariat mandate since June 2018. Once we review the recommendation of the resolutions review, we will have a process for ensuring resolutions are maintained and followed up. We are in the midst of making plans for the AOCC on June 15, 16, and 17. As you know, this isn't an election year. We have appointed the electoral officer, which is Gordon Wandabens, and the host organization will be Grand Council Treaty 3. We continue to monitor the COVID situation and the advice of public health professionals and how the assembly will unfold. We will be updating the Leadership Council later on this month, and hopefully we'll have a progress report to all of the chiefs on what their next steps will be. As we witness our political environment with the government, we have to rely on our collective unity. The staff at the Secretariat have sustained the mandates of leadership to ensure that they put forward the need for accountability of government towards First Nation citizens. The staff remain attentive to maintaining a dialogue for collective-based solutions with government representatives on the many fronts of health, environment, education, justice, and social. The technical work continues to support strategic approaches defined by the leadership. In closing, it remains an honor for me to work with the Ontario leadership and to support your efforts in a meaningful way for our people. Dane. Yonko.
Thank you, Tracy. Are there any questions for Tracy? Earlier we talked about maybe sending emails to you for any questions that the chiefs and their proxies may have. Are we still going into proceeding with that? Okay. Thank you, Tracy. And the next, there another presenter at this time is Lance Gobenkock. Is he around? Can I get some help with that? Not sure whether he's around.
I don't see him currently in the room. I don't know if Winterdawn sorry if I'm pronouncing that right, Lipscomb can maybe, I understand that she was supposed to join him or provide some assistance to the presentation. I'm not sure if she knows where he is.
So how long do we wish to wait for him then, Barrett?
Just give me one moment. He's re-entering the room right now.
Okay, thank you.
Lance, if you can hear us, you're up on the agenda right now for the OFNYPC update and the ISB update.
All right, thank you, Barrett, and thank you to the chiefs for inviting us to provide this update today. It's always good to join this assembly, and especially now today with COVID-19. I want to begin by recognizing our elders, the Ontario Regional Chief, the Leadership Council and Board of Directors, chiefs and councillors, young people, chiefs of Ontario staff and technicians, and our community members who are joining us from across the province. My name is Lance Kopakog. I am the OFNYPC Youth Representative, portfolio holder for the Leadership Council, and the co-chair of the Indigenous Sports Body. I'm joining you from Beausoleil First Nation and Anishinaabe Nation Southeastern region. And as always, it's an honor to be speaking to the Chiefs and Assembly to provide an update on the work of the OFNYPC in 2020 as we look forward to the year ahead. While I am thankful for the technology that enables us to gather in this way, I do look forward to all of us being able to gather again in person once again, hopefully sooner rather than later. In March of last year, our reality fundamentally changed as we all did our part to slow the spread, protect our healthcare system, and keep our communities, our families, and ourselves safe. There is no doubt that COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on our people, no matter where we live in Ontario. As we continue to navigate the second wave of this pandemic, our people are being harder hit by the coronavirus than in the first wave. In fact, my community of Beausoleil First Nation reported 3 cases of COVID-19 this month after 9 months of no cases due to our infection control measures. Our local health unit, Simcoe Muskoka, is also reporting cases of the UK variant. For many of us, we have had friends or family who have been sickened by this virus, some of whom are still struggling with the long-term effects of COVID-19. We pay special tribute to those that were taken by this pandemic. We know that COVID-19 has had an unfortunate impact on our elders and our knowledge keepers. When we lose an elder, it's a tragedy for all of our communities because that is a loss of our history and our knowledge. But in the face of this invisible threat, young people in all of our communities stepped up to do their part to protect our people. These young people are the ones who man our checkpoints, work on the front line as healthcare or essential workers, and are doing their part to end this pandemic. Young people in our communities are juggling their newfound responsibilities as frontline workers with their educational and career goals. And despite the changing world around us, young people are still working hard and demonstrating true resilience in this unprecedented time. As young people, we know that the effects of COVID-19 on our society will go well beyond health and will continue to impact us in the months, the years, and the decades to come. We will have to do the work of getting our communities back, as was mentioned today, to prosperity and creating a flourishing economy that will have better outcomes for all of us. Most importantly, we all have to work together to build back better. I want to acknowledge the important work of our leadership in defending our communities from COVID-19. When we first became aware of a potential threat, respond to it, and go above and beyond other responses, including federal and provincial, to keep COVID-19 at bay. We knew that COVID-19 would make its way to our communities, and we were prepared. Nearly every community that has had a positive case of COVID-19 has brought their cases to 0. This is because the community, all of our communities, work together by staying home, staying apart, and staying safe, because we know that a COVID-19 infection anywhere in our community is a COVID-19 infection everywhere in our community. As we begin to move into the next phase of this pandemic, our focus is increasingly on accessing vaccines and inoculating our residents. It's exciting to see elders and frontline workers in all regions of the province, particularly in the north, being inoculated against the coronavirus. Chiefs, I would stress to you the importance of ensuring that young people, and indeed all of our people, are provided with education on both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. We must make clear to our community members that these vaccines are safe, effective, and will save their lives, at the same time acknowledging and respecting that getting vaccinated is a personal decision and that vaccine hesitancy stems not from misinformation, but from the historical and ongoing traumas that we as Indigenous people face and continue to face within the healthcare system. I do think that getting vaccinated is an act of service to our communities. We must stress to everyone, when it's your turn, please get vaccinated. As the OFNYPC portfolio holder for the Leadership Council, I have been incredibly honored to have had the opportunity to sit at this level and learn from our leaders, especially now with our response to this pandemic. We must continue our efforts to bring this pandemic under control and allow for a gradual return to normal, whatever normal will look like after this pandemic. Unfortunately, as young people, we know that this pandemic will not be the last that we will face in our lifetimes. This really highlights the importance of us doing our part to not only combat the spread of disease, but makes it more urgent than ever for us to address the climate emergency. Despite the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, it provided a unique opportunity for the OFNYPC to develop new and innovative ways to engage youth from all 133 First Nations in Ontario. Due to generous funding provided by Indigenous Services, we were able to deliver youth gatherings in 2020 that focused on education on cannabis and governance and capacity building. In December, the OFNYPC hosted the first of a series of town halls that brought youth together to talk about their personal experiences with COVID-19 and the lessons that we can learn from this pandemic. Thanks to Zoom and other mediums that we now have available, we were able to consistently meet with each other to discuss priority items and other action items. The OFNYPC has remained active throughout this pandemic. Connor Martin from Six Nations and Jace Mandamin from the Independent First Nations were selected by the OFNYPC last fall to represent Ontario at the AFN National Youth Council. Of course, they're joined by Winter Lipscomb, who is joining us here today, and Pierre DeBosque from Chagin First Nation as the alternate reps to that table. Our AFN reps have been active at the AFN, including on very important discussions relating to the UN Declaration. One of the priority items that our national reps are working on is fulfilling Resolution 13, which was passed at the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly in December. This specific resolution deals with ending gender-based and orientation-based discrimination at the AFN. I want our chiefs in assembly to know that the OFNYPC was encouraged to see the passing of this resolution. We believe that it's incumbent on all of us to do our part to make our political spaces safer for all people. This is a starting point to other work that we have to do to make these same spaces welcoming and safer. In my view, it is necessary for us to have the same conversations as will be had at the AFN level on ending discrimination, addressing harassment, and providing space for those that faced harm to come forward to speak their truth. We want to acknowledge the Ontario Regional Chief for her leadership on this file and on other important matters relating to building capacity and supporting our young leaders. The OFNYPC will be an enthusiastic and active partner in those conversations. We also remain committed to supporting the new Indigenous sports body as it works towards being a fully functioning organization that serves the needs of our athletes and our community members. Both Dean Hill and I from Six Nations sit as the co-chairs of this new sports body. We circulated a communique to the chiefs in the fall regarding this appointment, and we continue to welcome the opportunity to engage with our leadership. On behalf of the Indigenous sports body, I am pleased to announce that we will be receiving up to $100,000 in funding to enable us to further advance the foundational work that we started 2 years ago. This is good news and will enable us to have the financial ability to conduct ourselves as a fully functional organization. I want to acknowledge Ogama Pelche of Wemkong for his community's generous support in acting as a flow-through agency for the Indigenous sports body's funding. Our efforts to be fully recognized as the provincial territorial Aboriginal sports body will continue as we look forward to further engagement with our federal and provincial partners. As an assembly, it's important that we continue to affirm that the Indigenous sports body is the only sports organization in Ontario to carry a mandate from this assembly to serve and represent First Nations. It's my hope that the next time we stand here, it will be to bring the good news that the Indigenous sports body has received its rightful recognition as the PTASB for Ontario. The Indigenous sports body appreciates the continued support from our leadership, and I'm excited for our work together on Indigenous support. Despite the pandemic, 2021 will be a busy year for the OFNYPC. We will continue to advance the economic, social, and political priorities of First Nations youth in Ontario. Although the situation with the pandemic remains fluid, I am hopeful that in this upcoming year, we will once again be able to deliver engaging gatherings to our young people across the province. We are hoping to deliver our long-awaited youth gathering on governance, either in person or through virtual delivery, pending future COVID-19 restrictions. I look forward to further engagement and collaboration with the Chiefs of Ontario and our Chiefs in Assembly. At this time, I am pleased to welcome Winter Lipscomb to the Assembly for the first time, who is the OFNYPC rep from Grand Council Treaty 3. Miigwech.
Bonjour, Bibon Dishnakas, Gawin Gegu and Nishna Bay Windswin, Mike under them, Hello everyone, my name is Winter Dawn Lipscomb, and I'd like to thank Lance for his update. I am the female representative from Grand Council Treaty Number 3 to the Ontario First Nation Young People's Council, as well as the Ontario female alternate to the Assembly of First Nations National Youth Council. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to address all of the chiefs today and joining fellow OFNYPC member Lance Kopagog to deliver the youth update. I want to start by recognizing the words of Chief Shiny Turtle earlier this morning regarding the mental health crisis our youth and many others have been experiencing throughout the pandemic. The pandemic has heightened the isolation and mental health crises that our youth are experiencing, and we've seen increasing youth overdoses. And we've heard from other youth that it's hard to maintain their sobriety during the lockdown, and they're grasping at any resources available to them to stay on a good path. Their access to the limited mental health resources that already exist has been significantly cut, and youth are struggling with finding their own spaces, and we need to support them as best we can. So I encourage all of the chiefs that are here today to support our COVID town halls, because there's space for youth to gather and to discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic has been impacting them, and to discuss the supports that the youth are going to need. This is an opportunity for the youth to build partnerships with all of the chiefs and leadership, and to understand how we can support all of our youth. So the first update I'm going to be providing is on the Youth Governance Toolkit, and under the direction and input from my fellow OFNYPC members, I've undertaken the graphic design and resource development of the OFNYPC Toolkit on Governance. The toolkit's aim is to support youth of all stages in starting their own community youth councils, with multiple guided resources helping them navigate the startup process. This resource, rather than explaining how the youth can start a youth council, is designed to help guide youth in their own development and provide the structure for youth to create their own vision and processes. Resources include a self-guided strategic planning session, budgeting sheet, and planning checklists, amongst more. The toolkit is currently under review within the OFNYPC and will be forwarded to the staff to be reviewed by the Chiefs of Ontario before being released. The OFNYPC will resume planning a governance gathering in the 2021-22 fiscal year, which will be held either virtually or in person pending the current COVID-19 restrictions. The OFNYPC, as Lance mentioned, has been busy working and developing partnerships with external organizations. We recently participated in a call with representatives from Box Initiative to discuss how the OFNYPC could be involved with creating Box Bursts. The Box Initiative is a program aimed at elementary students to promote physical activity and establishing a lifelong commitment to health and well-being. Additionally, we will be having our second COVID town hall on February 11th, discussing and focusing on student experiences during the pandemic and promoting mental wellness. We will be joined by Elder Emmy Mitchell talking about meditation and intuitive abilities to heal. We will also be participating in land and water, language and cultural revitalization with story and knowledge sharing with elders. There will be an upcoming paint night focusing on paint therapy led by a well-renowned Indigenous artist, and a further town hall discussing frontline worker experiences and youth connections. On the AFN National Youth Council side, as Lance mentioned, we've been focusing on Resolution 13. And as many of you know, this is about becoming a role model in ending sexual orientation and gender-based discrimination within the Assembly of First Nations, and was passed in December. And it's an incredibly important resolution to move forward. And I'd like to thank Ontario Regional Chief Archibald for being so passionate and vocal for her support of this work. As part of the resolution, the AFN National Youth Council was mandated to appoint a representative to act as an independent reviewer for an investigation into the discrimination within the AFN. The same mandate was given to the Women's and Elders Councils, and the AFN National Youth Council has identified Michelle Cameron of British Columbia as their selection to be appointed. Michelle identifies as a two-spirited individual with significant expertise and lived experience, and it was important to the AFN National Youth Council to ensure diversity and inclusion of impacted persons. At the OFMYPC level, I'm involved with sexual harassment in the workplace portfolio with Megan Fowler. This has included working with Megan to meet with the OFMYPC to discuss legal rights in the workplace and a collection of feedback on how to present this material in an engaging, relevant manner to youth. I believe this is important work, and I'm committed to ensuring a youth perspective is heard at both these levels. In addition to Resolution 13, the AFN National Youth Council participated in engagement sessions on the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People, and several AFN National Youth Council members participate in the UNDRIP working group. The AFN National Youth Council also participated in an engagement session with Heritage Canada to discuss the status of youth report and offer their commentary. Again, several members have volunteered to participate in the status of youth advisory group. So at this time, that is all the updates that I have, and I appreciate the Chief's time and allowing the OFNYPC to deliver their update. We've been very busy, and we are thankful for your continued support. Miigwech.
Thank you very much, both Lance and Winter, for the excellent presentation, for the updates for Chiefs. Thank you so much. And at this time, we move on to the agenda, and I would like now to reintroduce the regional chief, Roseanne Archibald. Oh, is she present now? Are you present now?
Yes, I am.
Hi there.
I want to say miigwech to Lance and to Winter. Really great presentation. The work that the youth are doing is always so welcome and so appreciated. And particularly the work that Lance has been doing and a group of very dedicated people on the Indigenous sports body. So thank you very much for that, Lance, for the update. And I'm having some problems with my agenda because it has some of my notes in it. Sorry. Okay, yeah, I found it. I found my notes. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for your patience. I've been having a lot of technical issues myself today, but thank you, Teresa. So I wanted to remind everyone who's listening that it's a time for us to be grateful and thankful for our health, and to be thankful for our loved ones that are still here with us, but also to recognize that we have, that we that our people have suffered in different ways from the pandemic, especially when they lose a loved one. And some of those deaths have been COVID deaths. And we have had, at our last count, we had 10 deaths in Ontario, and all of them were elders, the ones that we keep track of in terms of data in my office. And that's a great loss when somebody who is a knowledge keeper, a keeper of the language, a person who holds our culture and our traditional practices in a space for us, when they pass away, it's very hard in our communities. But there have been other circumstances as well where people have passed away. And we did hear the youth mention it, as well as Chief Shining Turtle, with addictions, mental health, reduced access to healthcare. This pandemic has interrupted our normal grieving process. But one thing that we can still do, even in this setting, this virtual setting, is we can still turn to our traditions. And so therefore, we want to take this time to turn to the drum for an honor song for all those individuals who have passed away from COVID-19, as well as those that we have lost during this pandemic. I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And Roseanne, Mary's in chief. So Chimigwech, Ministagan, Kirnaskamitin. Excellent, Regional Chief, for that honor song, and the drumming from the youth. At this time, I believe that that ends that session part of our agenda, and we now go to the afternoon agenda, and I turn it over to Rain Kunis for this to share that part of the meeting. Swingwich.
Yes, hello, and thank you very much, Teresa. And that was truly a beautiful and wonderful honor song that was played here for COVID-19 victims. Understanding that we're a little we're stretched for time, so forgive me by jumping right into the next agenda item here, which is going to be the Chiefs of Ontario restructuring update. Of course, I'd like to welcome and invite Chief Melvin Hardy to come and speak on the issue along with the panelists. Chief Melvin Hardy, are we here? Oh, it does. I suppose before I just noticed this right now with Larry Carr, noticed a hand raised for, I suppose, a question before I made that announcement. What do we have?
Good afternoon.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to say Chimigwech for that honor song. And I just, I think it really resonated with me, and it's Lori Carr. Resonated with me to the effect that I needed to say this. And in the last year and a half, my community, my small community, has lost nine citizens, from a young baby to our elder with, and 6 of those have been during COVID. And so 4 of those people were my uncles, one being my last uncle on the one side of my family, and a cousin. And so when we talk about doing these honor songs, and that brings a lot of light and healing to our communities and to ourselves as leaders, when we have to be there, and we have to be there for all those other things that we do, but we also have to be there for our community when we lose somebody. And it's especially hard when it's your own family and you can't do those things that you're used to doing because of COVID. So I really wanted just to say Chimigwech for that song, for respecting and honoring those people that we've all lost. And more important, and as important, is to remember that each leader take care of themselves during these times and take those times for themselves. You know you have to keep going and keep being there, but still take that minute for yourself. So Chimigwech, I really, truly, greatly appreciate the song and being able to do what I needed to do during that song. Miigwech.
Thank you very much, Larry Carr, and my most sincere condolences for your losses. And we do appreciate your words here and regarding such a powerful statement during this pandemic. But on that note, I would like to transition, and as I invited Chief Melvin Hardy to give a conversation about the Chiefs of Ontario restructuring update. Whenever you're ready, Chief.
Bonjour, Chief Mel Hardy. Zungizi de go, Makoktorum Pijuaba Gzaki, Nishtubek Donji, Chief Mel Hardy from Rocky Bay First Nation. Yeah, I have to, and I do appreciate Chief of Carr, her sentiments, because I totally agree with that as well. And the song is very touching. And being in this COVID time for all of us is very challenging. And we need to do to make ends meet, even when we have people in our community being affected by COVID. So, bonjour, good afternoon. The presentation that will be made up today will bring you up to date on all activities relating to the Chiefs of Ontario restructuring. A lot of work has taken place that is aimed at strengthening the COO organization. As you know, a technical committee and the Chiefs Oversight Committee was struck a few years ago to undertake the restructuring work to report back to the Chiefs in Assembly on progress. I'm pleased to be working with the Chiefs and the Oversight Committee as part of this effort. It's important to note that this work is going on at the Assembly of First Nations to renew the AFN Charter, which is Chief Dean Sayers and myself, alternate, who's working on that committee as well. Chief Dean Sayers and I represent the First Nations in Ontario on the AFN Chiefs Committee and Charter Renewal. So we are very aware of how the work is going on the AFN Charter Renewal, as well as our work here in the region to update the COO governing documents. There are areas of the AFN Charter renewal work that impact our regional offices in the national regional relationships, such as the need to clarify the regional chiefs' responsibilities to the AFN and accountability to the First Nations that elect them in their respective regions. We need to articulate these relationships and accountabilities in the COO governing documents, and they need to align with what is articulated in the AFN governing documents. At this time, there appears to be some inconsistencies between the AFN governing documents and the Chiefs of Ontario current and contemplated governing and accountability structures. The main differences arise with respect to accountability of the regional chiefs, both as members of the executive of the AFN and as holders of the political office. The AFN states that the regional chiefs are bound by the AFN Charter and Code of Conduct. However, the Chiefs of Ontario draft charter, the draft charter has the Ontario Regional Chief exclusively accountable to the chiefs in the Assembly in Ontario. So we want to avoid potential conflict arising where a regional chief is required to be accountable to two different organizations simultaneously at the same time. So that's just one example of where further dialogue and clarification is required. Pam Hunter and Catherine Hensel are going to walk you through the PowerPoint presentation of anything in relation to COO's charter work and the AFN's work to date. I had talking to Chief Sayers, and he had go to a different meeting, and he wanted me to pass out a message. He said, we need to make mention that we are not really sure what cosmic type of issues will be brought to the annual assembly in July from the AFN's Chief Committee on Restructuring. We will figure out that out, and we have a meeting set for February 18th. Progress has been slow due to COVID, but rest assured there won't be any controversial issues as it is an election year. In particular, there is a Prince Edward Island issue. With that, I will ask Pam and Catherine to proceed. You guys.
Okay, thank you, Chief Hardy. Can we put up the PowerPoint presentation? Thank you. Good afternoon, Regional Chief, Grand Chiefs, and all chiefs on the Zoom meeting, as well as all meeting participants. My role in the restructuring work is to coordinate the project, coordinate the technical committee, and the Chiefs Oversight Committee. So I work with Catherine Hensel, Hensel Barristers, and they are providing advice to the technical committee and the Chiefs Committee as we do this work. So Catherine's also present on the call right now and will assist in clarifying any issues as we go through the presentation. So we can just go to the next slide. Just by way of, next one, please. Just by way of background, quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on background. This initiative has been going on for a couple of years. Back in June of 2018, the Chiefs accepted the final report prepared by Jenny Restuhl on COO restructuring. And from there, it was a discussion item again at the November 2018 Chiefs in Assembly, where chiefs passed resolution 4518, mandating the establishment of the technical committee and chiefs oversight. So at that point, the chiefs asked for the committees to look at what work had been done to date with regard to coup restructuring. Over the years, there had been several discussions about it and attempts to put forward recommended changes. So in April 2019, the committees came back to the Chiefs in Assembly and provided some options to move forward in ways that would strengthen the Chiefs of Ontario organization. And the Chiefs at that time passed another resolution mandating the committees to move forward on the work to revise Chiefs of Ontario's constituting documents. So documents such as the Chiefs of Ontario Charter, which to that point had only ever been in draft. They had never been finalized to that point. Next slide, please. So the work that the committees have been doing, it's been pretty intense. There's a lot of review, a lot of discussion, and at each of our meetings we find takes us into different areas and raises more questions that require some research, some legal advice, further discussion with Leadership Council at our regular updates to them. So it's something that it will always be an ongoing discussion. And as you'll see in the documents, there's provision for amendment. So once we get to a point where we have final drafts, which we are targeting AOCC, the documents, of course, we'll bring them up to the best spot that they can be in at this time. But of course, they're always evolving and have amendment provisions. So the documents we're currently looking at and reviewing include the Ontario Regional Chief Oath of Office. So we do have a draft right now. It requires some further work and even some discussion with the Assembly of First Nations. As Chief Hardy noted, there's a need to ensure our governing documents align. And the way they're drafted right now, the AFN document and ours, regional chiefs are in a position where they have accountabilities to both organizations. So we need to make sure that the documents don't conflict and that the wording and Chiefs of Ontario governing documents align and complement the wording in the Assembly of First Nations governing documents with respect to responsibilities and accountabilities of regional chief. So we have that document in draft and the draft coup charter. Right now it has 31 articles to the charter and 3 appendixes. So a lot of work's gone into this document. It's very much a line by line process. And we feel we're at a good spot right now, but it does need some more work. We also have a draft Leadership Council Code of Conduct. And you may recall last February when we met in Ottawa, the Chiefs in Assembly passed a Code of Conduct, but that Code of Conduct was very general in terms of Code of Conduct expected of anyone, chiefs, observers that attends a coup assembly or some sort of coup event or forum. So the Code of Conduct I'm talking about here is specific to the Leadership Council, and there was not one in place prior. So it's draft right now, still requires review by the Leadership Council and will be brought back to the Chiefs in Assembly. The resolutions policy document, which you'll hear more about following this presentation, I believe. And this is with respect to how resolutions are submitted, the whole process around drafting. I believe there'll be a template developed, as well as how do you deal with resolutions that have been on the books for 5, 10, even more years. So you'll hear more about that later. And finally, the interim services agreement for the Ontario Regional Chief. And I'll talk more about that later in the presentation. So for this particular meeting, the draft coup charter has been provided to you, chiefs, for your review. Please keep in mind it's draft, we're still working on it. We've also provided the leadership code of conduct in your package, as well as the resolutions policy. So those documents have been provided to you so that you have an opportunity to start familiarizing yourself with them now. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the Ontario Regional Chief Oath of Office. So the intent of this document is to be signed by the newly elected regional chiefs prior to assuming the duties of office. And historically, when a regional chief in Ontario is elected, they sign an oath of confidentiality. So the oath of office that we're working on right now is a little more involved. It's new. It hasn't been in place before. So it's a new document that the committees and Leadership Council felt is appropriate to have in place for an Ontario Regional Chief. It helps to clarify some roles, responsibilities, and obligations to the organization. Next slide, please. The draft coup charter. As I said before, there was a draft coup charter in place, but it was always in draft. It has never been finalized. So we are hoping to make some history, I guess, at the AOCC and finalize a document. And of course, you know, these documents are written in stone. There are amendment provisions, but we are working on getting it to a place where Chiefs and Assembly feel it is appropriate to approve a coup charter and to move forward with that document in place. So it's the overarching governing document of the organization. It includes a mission statement, vision statement, description of the entities, such as Chiefs and Assembly, Leadership Council, Ontario Regional Chief, authorities and accountabilities, the role of the coup Secretariat, how amendments are made. And at this time has 3 appendixes in draft. One is the electoral rules for the Ontario Regional Chief elections, as well as the Leadership Council terms of reference. And the third appendix is the complaints and disputes appendix, which Catherine will help provide an overview of shortly. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the third appendix, Appendix C, is the complaints and disputes section. And this is completely new. There has never been a formal process set out in writing for the Chiefs of Ontario organization. And really is common practice for any organization because, you know, in the rare event that there are complaints or disputes, there's a clear process set down in paper for people to follow in responding to complaints in a timely manner, but also in a fair and transparent manner. So that's what Appendix C does. Because when, you know, things like disputes and complaints happen, you don't want to be fumbling around, you know, trying to figure out how to respond. So the purpose of Appendix C is to set that out in writing. So basically, Appendix C is focused on upholding the integrity of the Chiefs of Ontario office. And it's been added as an appendix to review and address any complaints about Leadership Council members and/or the Ontario Regional Chief. So the complaints that we're referencing here are with regard to actions or behaviors allegedly committed while representing the Chiefs of Ontario. And what the committees are recommending at this stage are 2 separate committees be created to receive and review complaints. One being the Leadership Council Integrity Committee, and the second, the Ontario Regional Chief Integrity Committee. And the next couple of slides will describe the composition or the proposed composition and the function of those committees. Next slide, please. Now, Catherine, can I ask you to provide an overview of the next couple of slides?
Sure, and just to be clear, these committees will have no role unless and until a complaint is brought about the regional chief going forward, and with respect to their conduct, or a member of the leadership council. And the composition of the committees is just, it'll be a standing brief or a portfolio, but it won't have any, those people won't have any anything to do other than to know what to do unless and until such a complaint is brought. And as Pam mentioned, this is, you know, hopefully this is something that'll only come up very rarely, but it does help to have something in place so that people know, both the regional chief and the members of the leadership council know what the sort of thresholds are for conduct, as well as people know where and how to bring complaints and how they're going to be dealt with, and to ensure that they're being dealt with in a fair and defensible way under both the standards imposed by both Canadian law, but also the laws that govern your communities and your relations with each other as best possible. So we've integrated restorative justice measures wherever and whenever possible, and reference to doing things basically in a good way and in a way that's consistent with the values of the communities served by the Chiefs of Ontario. The other thing to note is leadership council members these are Grand Chiefs for the most part, and they are not subject to the oversight or discipline of the Chiefs of Ontario. They're accountable to their PTO. So their codes of conduct and the jurisdiction of the Integrity Committee is really limited to the work that those people might be doing, that those Grand Chiefs might be doing in relation to Chiefs of Ontario and the Leadership Council, rather than more generally. The Leadership Integrity Committee would be one member of the Leadership Council, so another Grand Chief, an elder, a member of the Elders Committee, the Regional Chief and the Chief Operating Officer to coordinate. You know, foreseeably, many complaints would just be shifted back to the appropriate PTO, provincial territorial organization or community, as being outside of the Chiefs of Ontario and the Integrity Committee's mandate or business, really. But if it does pertain to something, conduct that took place in relation to the Leadership Council itself or the Chiefs of Ontario specifically, then it would fall under the jurisdiction of this committee under this appendix, and this committee would report to the Leadership Council. Next slide. And the Regional Chief Integrity Committee has somewhat of a broader role and mandate, because the Regional Chief is ultimately accountable to the Chiefs of Ontario and particularly to the Chiefs in Assembly. And the Regional Chiefs Integrity Committee is to be composed of one member of the Leadership Council, one member of the Elders Committee, and one member of the Chiefs of Ontario Board of Directors to play the administrative role to keep the Chief Operating Officer out of it. And again, the role of this committee is to address any complaints against the Regional Chief, and where necessary, refer to discipline policy and any appropriate restorative justice measures if they're appropriate to respond to alleged misconduct, and report to the Leadership Council. And next slide. And so what we've tried to do here, and I can say that, you know, as you probably gathered from events over the last couple of years in the Maritimes with one of the regional chiefs out there and otherwise, people didn't, organizations, regions, and the Assembly of First Nations did not have processes in place, which made it a bit of a scramble when concerns were raised about conduct. It made it unpredictable for people complaining, for the complainants. It also made it very unpredictable and potentially unfair to the people about whom complaints were being made. So having a process in place ahead of time that is as good as we can make it. It'll never be perfect, but as good as we can make it, makes it fair and as transparent as possible. And the goal is to ensure the safety, dignity, and integrity of the Chiefs of Ontario as an organization, the Chiefs in Assembly, and the business of this organization and this assembly. But again, we were building it somewhat from the ground up because we didn't really want to just import employment disciplinary regimes because they weren't either culturally appropriate or particularly appropriate in a political realm. I think that's the last slide on Appendix C. Is there another one, Pam? Oh, there's a code of conduct. Okay, so the Leadership Council Code of Conduct, that was approved, or the Chiefs of Ontario Code of Conduct was approved last year. Leadership Code of Conduct, as I said before, only applies, it's not meant to govern all the political and professional dealings of the Grand Chiefs. That would be inappropriate, of course. So it's only pertains to conduct at a Chiefs of Ontario event, meeting, assembly, where the Leadership Council member is fulfilling their role as a representative of the Chiefs of Ontario. And the goal is to respect and recognize the authority of the provincial territorial organization and communities for their elected representative in most cases. Next slide. There. I think we've covered off all the Appendix C stuff, have we not, Pam?
Yep, that's it. Thanks, Catherine. And if there are any questions, we can take some at the end, of course. So as I mentioned, the other piece being the resolutions policy, and I spoke to that a bit already, and you'll hear more about it following this presentation. So if we could move on to the next slide. The last piece that I mentioned early in the presentation is the interim Ontario Regional Chief Services Agreement. And last year, the Assembly of First Nations requested all regions take over responsibility for the salary of their respective regional chiefs. So the money used to flow from the AFN to COO, and it was basically administered at the Assembly of First Nations. So they've requested a change to that relationship. And this requires COO to develop a services contract with the Ontario Regional Chief. And that's in the works right now, I understand. The discussion is being led by the Board of Directors, the Chief Operating Officer, and Legal Counsel. And I believe there is a draft there that is being worked on by the Board, Chief Operating Officer, and Legal Counsel. Next slide. So before I talk about next steps, a draft resolution has been provided to the chiefs for this meeting, and it's with respect to a follow-up to a resolution passed by the chiefs in August. During your chiefs meeting then, you passed a resolution basically calling on the Assembly of First Nations to establish a regional technical committee to support the work of the AFN Chiefs Committee on Charter Renewal. So that resolution was conveyed to the AFN, and the Chiefs Committee on AFN Charter Renewal did accept that suggestion. And so technical people from the regions are now able to provide support to the chiefs at that level. However, the AFN is not providing any resources to support that. And the draft being put forward to this meeting, being moved by Chief Hardy, is to call on the AFN basically to seek resources to support political and technical regional staff to participate in that important discussion at the AFN. So that's in your, it's with the resolutions committee. It's been distributed, I believe, to all chiefs. So I'll just wrap up the next steps and I'll pass it back to Chief Hardy to speak a little bit about that. So basically between now and June, AOCC, the Chiefs Committee and the Chiefs Oversight Committee will continue to work toward finalizing drafts of the documents that we've talked about in our presentation. In March and April, we are planning to organize webinars or information sessions for chiefs to join to learn more about the charter, the oath of office, all the documents in advance of the AOCC, because it's a lot of, there's a lot of documents there. So those webinars will enable chiefs to ask questions about the documents and any clarification about them, so that when AOCC does roll around, you feel comfortable with the content, you're able to have a good discussion at that time. So Chief Hardy, I'll pass it back over to you at this point.
Hey, Miigwech, I just want to give you a little bit background here in the resolution. We had planned to put the oath of office resolution on the table today. Then we had received a letter from AFN with regard to the position of the AFN and where her loyalty lies. And then at the same time, when I think we had a special UNDRIP meeting where we are Chiefs of Ontario, where we were having a discussion, myself, Ontario Regional Chief, and Chief Dean Sayers had to also, I was actually on the call, but they had to fly back and forth to jump on that call with the Chiefs Committee on Charter Renewal. What they were doing is pretty well, this discussion was going to a roundtable on the AFN committee, and there was challenges about that in the letter we got saying that no, I need to be able to research this further regarding the role of the Ontario Regional Chief, and as it stands, the AFN executive feels that we need to do research, but there was not consensus with regard to the role that if the Ontario Regional Chief was dedicated specifically to the AFN, because there's a few other provinces, the regional that was put in there, of the people at that meeting saying that, yeah, they, Manitoba, for instance, said they feel the same. So there was a few other, there was not really a consensus, but there's certainly discussion. And we didn't want to put the Chiefs of Ontario organization or get into a fight with them about that, because that's what it would turn into. So this is why today we put this resolution, and I think you see it in the package. And I think, Chief Dean Sears was going to second that, but he had to leave. But I think I did texting Chief Helen Pavla, and then I asked her if she was second. She said, yeah, and I just want to verify that. And if this can be moved as soon as possible, or there'll definitely be discussion. And if discussion is going to be a while, then the consideration to move this for a period for tomorrow. And I'll leave it at that for any questions. Miigwech.
Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. I'd like to also make sure that I reach this out informally. As we had talked about, there will be questions right now. So I'd like to formally open up the floor for any questions via the raised hand function. And it looks like we have our first question here from Donald Maracle. You have the floor.
Yeah. My question is the taking over of paying the regional chief. Is there a formula that all the chiefs, the regional chiefs, get the same salary, or is it based on the population of the region? Is there any information that anyone can share with regard to the salary amount that would be transferred to the Chiefs of Ontario to satisfy this contract? And is there equity, or is there an issue that would have to be resolved?
U.S. Chief America, I think, Catherine, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, our understanding based on conversations with AFN is that it was completely inconsistent across the country. There were different contracts, different arrangements, different benefits being paid, different perks, and very different salary levels across the country. So what we've done in the interim agreement, just the bridge from April 1st until the election, is just replicated what the regional chief is receiving now from the Assembly of First Nation as exactly and precisely as we possibly can. And but the Assembly of First Nations, it's my understanding, understood that there was a significant issue if all the regional chiefs across the country were receiving different amounts with different contractual arrangements and different benefits, and that was unsupportable and unsustainable. So that's one of the reasons that they've chosen, rather than trying to impose a consistent amount across the country, they've devolved it to the regions and said, it's up to you how much. There'll be a budget under the contribution agreement, but but it's up to the regions how much they pay the regional chief going.
And but I guess so the AFN will continue to get the pot of money, then dole it out. There'll be a contribution agreement with the chiefs of Ontario and the AFN for that pot of money. Is that how it'll work?
Yeah.
And so I think we better be clear, know for certain what the formula is, how that's going to be divided up among the regions to make sure there's not an unresolved issue there at that level about the amount for the Ontario region.
Of course, we will, Chief Miracle, we will definitely follow up on that, Miigwech.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chief Markle.
Yeah.
Do I hear a voice right now in terms of what's happening?
I think that was an accidental.
Yes. Oh, my apologies. Perfect. Well, I'd like to see then with terms of the presentation here. Is there any more questions before we continue on with the next agenda? By the
okay, only for the Chief Hardy. Myself, I just want the resolution. So I'm assuming that we can put the resolution on the floor tomorrow to squeeze it in someplace, maybe between snacks. I don't know if we can find the time. That'd be most appreciated. Thank you.
I do see another hand raised here. My apologies if I pronounce your name incorrectly, Chief. Pama Jawan, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Very good report. I guess one of the things that has always bothered me, and I've been around for some 40 years now, and I want to tell you that a lot of times I've seen repetitive resolutions that have been passed many years ago, and sometimes those resolutions are, have various impacts, or they never get dealt with. And one of the things that I think that should be happening so that a lot of these things are getting dealt with is to move those resolutions forward somehow, because a lot of resolutions are very good. They have very good materials in them, and some of them have some bad stuff in them too. So I'm just wondering how we can, move resolutions forward in an expedient way, because sometimes, we pass resolutions. Next time, we may not hear about that resolution for another 3 years.
Well, Chief, definitely, Miigwech, definitely, we have a meeting, myself and Dean have a meeting with the AFN Charter Renewal on the February 18th, and we'll be sure to mention this resolution should it pass. We'll be sure to mention it at the table, because it's almost like we're going to be the guys that nobody wants to talk to over there. That's how it's going to be, because it seems like they look at all the stuff they're doing, but we need to fight, and we'll tougher out to, in our in-camera session. There are some suggestions what we may do with regard to that. At this point right now, we'll see what happens if the resolution passes, but we'll have to address it on the table on the 18th, and we definitely will. Because
yeah. And most certainly, and that was a prime example of the one that was mentioned there earlier on today. So, Miigwech.
Thank you very much. Now, if there's any more questions, I'd like to, again, with the raised hand feature, if we can, that we may continue. Sorry, my lights came back on.
if not, Chief Miigwech, for the team, the technical team, what they're doing, and the staff. It's like they're working hard, so it should make us for their hard work and time. But
Perfect. Well, and of course, if there's any more questions following up as we move to the next agenda item, we'd like to, got my little chihuahua really wanting the conversation. Any resolutions or sorry, any questions in terms of this presentation, please put them inside of the messaging here and refer to what the resolution or what presentation you have a question about. We'll get to those very shortly. But aside from that, I no longer see any more hands, so I will be transitioning to the next agenda topic. I'd like to say nyawa and miigwech to the presenters, including Chief Hardy here. And we'll be moving on to the next agenda item, which of course is the resolution report. I'd like to invite and welcome Tracy Atone to begin, which is of course our Chief Operating Officer.
Tracy Anton.
Anton.
Boss.
Boy, I'm gonna get it this time, right? My apologies. I'd like to formally welcome Tracy Anton, Chief Operating Officer, for the resolution report.
It's actually
Thank you,
Anto.
goodies. Yes. Thank you, Chief Miracle.
There goes your
Thank you,
honorarium.
I just wanted to make some brief comments before we go into our PowerPoint presentation. As you heard, as we're doing the charter work, there are some administrative issues that needed to be cleared up with the resolutions. And you can guess that since 1975 to 2019, we have 12 binders full of resolutions. So we had a contractor, Nancy Johnson, go through all of the resolutions and put them into a report. And there are resolutions that would need to be retired. That means they wouldn't be rescinded, they'd be retired and archived, and then we could streamline our processes for resolutions. And we hope that this will support the whole charter renewal, et cetera, and we would have a more modernized way of keeping track of the resolutions. Nancy was our contractor, Nancy Johnson. She was unable to be with us today, but she did do a recording of the PowerPoint. And so I'll ask the folks monitoring that to please put that up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Johnson, and I'm doing a presentation on resolutions review. This was an initiative that took place from November 2019 to May 2020. So as this review got underway, it's important to note this was the first time such a review had been done. And the purpose was to go through all the Chiefs of Ontario resolutions dating back to 1975 to identify any that were no longer active. And those ones would be recommended then to be retired. It was understood that we would need to take those forward to the Chiefs in Assembly to make that decision. As the review got underway, a number of questions came up, such as how would we identify inactive resolutions? What would it mean by retiring resolutions? So a number of discussions took place with the Chiefs of Ontario policy leads, and the information and the questions that were raised in this review led to the drafting of a resolutions policy. And I understand that that's going to be presented as well at this assembly. So the process of doing this resolutions review involved going through one by one the hard copies of a total of 2,581 resolutions. They're currently in 52 categories, and they're housed within the white binders at the Chiefs of Ontario office. So the review was focused on the activity that was mandated in the be it resolved clauses of each resolution and whether that activity had been completed. In order to try to determine that, document review was conducted with input from the Chiefs of Ontario policy sector leads to track resolution follow-up activity. A number of reports and briefing notes, et cetera, were reviewed to try to determine what had been completed. The challenge in doing that was that there was limited follow-up information, especially on the older resolutions. The other question was again about what it meant to retire inactive resolutions. So additional research was conducted looking at how First Nations regional organizations outside of Ontario and at the AFN level, how this is addressed. So as the work got underway, the be it resolved clauses, that information was copied into a total of 52 charts, which became appendices to the final review report, which was completed in June 2020. There was also an index of all resolutions created. And in going through them one by one, it became clear gradually that most of the resolutions, in fact, could be considered to be time sensitive, meaning that time had lapsed since they had been passed, and oftentimes issues had changed, or in many cases, we did find information to show that the required information had been completed. There were also a number of duplicate copies of resolutions where they may have been filed in more than one category. There were also a number of resolutions where the original was later replaced by a more recent resolution. And then there were a number of resolutions that had not been adopted. They may have been tabled at the Assembly or withdrawn or defeated, or may have been passed and then were later rescinded. So basically the process looked like this after going through them, that we could identify those resolutions that are still active and separate from the resolutions to retire for these reasons that have just been mentioned. In total, again, it was 2,581 resolutions that were reviewed going back to March 1975. And these resolutions went up to and included the resolutions from the February 2020 Chiefs Assembly. Out of that total, there were 2,506 that were considered no longer active. Again, either that they were time sensitive, where tasks had been completed or a significant amount of time had passed. So that was a total of 1,813 resolutions. And then another 377 that were duplicate copies, and 176 resolutions that had either been tabled, withdrawn, defeated, or rescinded, and another 140 resolutions that had later been updated. Other findings from the review included that the issues are often very complex and cross-cutting. They may fit within a number of the different priority areas of policy. Also that conducting the follow-up on those issues that are raised and the activity that's mandated in the resolutions is impacted by a number of things, including not only how urgent the issue is, but funding limitations, human resource limitations, staff turnover, leadership turnover, and whether or not you get cooperation from external governments. And in some of the older resolutions in particular, the follow-up tasks and timeframes were not clearly stated. There were a number of recommendations that came out of this review, not only regarding what to do with those resolutions that are seen as inactive, but also about archiving the resolutions once they could be retired, and streamlining the management or the filing and access of resolutions for the future. So here are the recommendations. The first two are about what we just mentioned, that 2,506 resolutions be formally retired by resolution of the Chiefs in Assembly. And number two, that there be formal acknowledgement of all of the work that's been done since 1975 by the leadership, by staff, by elders, by community to complete mandated activity from the resolutions. 3 and 4 get into the archiving that once they're formally retired, those 2,506 inactive resolutions would be retired in resolutions binders, and that the remaining active resolutions, 75, be designated as active and be kept in a binder noted that these are the active resolutions beyond 2020. Recommendation 5, that the 52 appendices of the final report be used as an electronic database. So that gives you information that would be posted on the Chief's portal for use by Ontario First Nations, as well as internally the Chiefs of Ontario R Drive. And Appendix 53 would be also utilized and posted in the same manner so that it could be an index to help locate archived resolutions, and you could find them either by number, by name, by year, or by subject. Beyond 2020, for the new resolutions, we would recommend in number 7, streamlining the categories from 52, and I had come up with this list of 11, and I understand that's been somewhat revised now, and that will be listed in the resolutions policy, the new headings. Recommendation 8, that the index be continued as well on an ongoing basis. 9 and 10 to do with support resolutions and non-adopted. So filing the support resolutions that come from individual communities as their own section, and also filing those resolutions that were not adopted or rescinded under procedural resolutions. Also that the resolution numbering itself be kept consistent, and one method always be utilized, and that's spelled out in the resolutions policy. And that after each assembly, the resolution numbering be reviewed just to ensure that there is no duplication of resolution numbers. Also, that the access to the resolutions be controlled by allowing them only through the Chiefs portal and the R Drive rather than being publicly accessible on the Chiefs of Ontario website. And that number 14, that that resolution follow-up tasks, timeframes, and leads be identified in the resolutions just to have it clarified. And 15, that external governments appropriately fund the Chiefs of Ontario office so that the function of management and follow-up of the resolutions be clearly seen as a function, and it should be funded adequately to do so. And the last recommendation here is to establish a 10-year cycle of reviewing and retiring inactive resolutions. So that's it for this report. There is more detailed information in the actual final report as well, and hopefully that's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Right now, I'd like to make sure that we open this up again. If there's any more questions in terms of regarding what we have for the resolutions report, I'd like to open this up to the floor, and with the raised hand feature, we'd like to open it up. Well, with that, got one. Caught me right at the end. Right there, I'd like to recognize Chief Donald Markle for a question.
If the resolutions can't be acted on, or it's no longer relevant, maybe we should have a resolution to rescind that resolution, that there's no further follow-up required. And that way, I think you could better administrate, so you don't have everything in a big box wondering what the status of it is. So I think as the staff make that determination, maybe they could draft a resolution that either be rescinded because it's no longer relevant, or there's no further action required, or something like that, just so the chiefs know where these resolutions are at.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Miracle. I think that was the hope that we could do all of that work. Right now, this report is for you as leadership to review and send any comments in. It is the hope that the resolutions policy would take care of some of those issues that you raised, Chief Miracle, as well as take care of the recommendations, so that in going forward, we would have a streamlined approach to all the resolutions, knowing that every resolution is still available and can be called upon through a database system. So come June, we are hoping that the report would be adopted and that a resolution to retire and archive those resolutions named in the report, and that we would go forward with implementing the recommendations in the report. So this again will be brought back to the Chiefs in Assembly. The report is quite lengthy, so that's why we wanted to make sure that you had every opportunity to review the report and then come back in June with adopting the resolutions policy as well as the report itself, and with the recommendation to retire and archive some of those resolutions.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to, again, if there's any more questions before we move on with the raise hand feature, I'd like to hear from you. And we got another, sorry, my screen's a little hazy here. So we got Chief Shining Turtle with a comment, or sorry, a question. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. The software that would be used to track and the different resolutions. I saw a software at one point where you typed in keywords like, we have these resolutions all the time. And coincidentally, I did the calculation. At every year, we average 60 resolutions, which is quite a bit, right? So that's probably gone down a lot. But when you did the math over the time, we were averaging 57 resolutions. I just rounded off to 60. That's quite a few at any given year. But there was a software that you would just type in. So somebody says they want education, or we want to advance an education software, and you go over to the Secretariat, they type it in, and then it just starts reaming off every resolution that has education. Because I think there's so many of them in that area, technical issues and what have you. So I've seen that. I think the Union of Ontario Indians invested in that software some years ago. And it just gave you, so if you were thinking about bringing a resolution, you go through the administration or the Secretariat first to help you see if it hasn't been covered anywhere, so we can make better use of our time. So I think some efficiencies are in order there, so I thank you for this presentation.
And thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief. That's our hope, is that we can get this streamlined and automated so that that is an easier process, not only for our resolutions committee, but for leadership who want to look at what resolutions are still on the books. So yeah, go.
Wonderful. Well, if there is no more further questions in terms of the resolution report, we would like to continue on with the end of the day. I'd like to now welcome back our MC, Matthew. Welcome back.
Thank you, Lion Goonies. Nice job there, obviously. We do want to thank Lion Goonies and Teresa for assisting with the co-chairing. I want to also thank all the leadership for sticking around. I did want to get to a certain point in terms of our agenda. I wanted to start the day tomorrow with the sector reports. I just want to give a little bit of highlights. We did hear a little bit of vaccine update. The chiefs did go into an in-camera discussion. We did have a little update on the Secretariat update. We had the Youth Council and the Indigenous Sports Body update. Lance and Winter, what a highlight of the day. I mean, what resources they are. I mean, the next generation is so well equipped. Restructuring update, we got then, we had some cues there. I do want to recognize Chief Laforme's comment there around the growing independence and pulling away of PTOs and how would this be represented. So I just want to acknowledge there was a question in the chat and we haven't lost it, and it will be part of our discussion moving forward. We had a resolutions discussion also. So where that brings us for tomorrow is that we'll start the day with the sector updates. I haven't lost the desire to have a conversation around the Governor General and also the upcoming elections nationally at the Assembly of First Nations. We also had a few other items that we wanted to make sure were on the agenda, which was the opioid crisis, the mental health issues that are happening out there, and also the economic development conversation that was wanted to be had by the chiefs. Our role, obviously, as chairs, is to make sure we get through all the discussion items and through all the resolutions. We are now probably close to 5 o'clock. I'm on the Quebec side. I have to be home before curfew or they'll arrest me. So I do want to make sure that we get through this agenda and get right to our agenda tomorrow morning. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows we're trying to get through the resolutions as much as possible, keeping in mind that there were a few items that wanted to be discussed by the chiefs. We are back tomorrow morning at 9:30. Although there's pressure to start at 6, we will start at 9:30. But 9:30, and I'm thinking we'll probably go to around 3:30 tomorrow afternoon, only so that we make sure we get through all the agenda items and also all through the resolutions that have been presented. With that, seeing no other comments or hands up on the screen, I believe that brings us to the end of our day today. It is almost 5 o'clock. So I did keep you longer than anticipated. So I do want to thank everyone for sticking around for our day today. We'll wrap up our day today. We'll start again tomorrow morning at 9:30. Be safe out there. Take care. We stand adjourned until tomorrow morning. Miigwech.